Bilingualism a problem. Now, bilingualism was initially seen as a problem, especially under the modernist theory of 20th century. Now, what was the modernist theory? The modernist theory would say that if people were to progress, they need to move away from everything that was traditional, and people need to move from this agrarian societies to industrialized societies. And this ideological framework imagined this construct of a nation. So, one nation, one language. And then the need of the hour at that time was seen that everyone must be well versed in that one language, and there needs to be a kind of a national unity. So bilingualism, that is people having different languages in a given state, was seen as a problem. Now, as we discussed, the whole concept was under this modernist theory of development was that we need to transition from this tradition to modern disposition. So anything that was seen as traditional was looked down upon, and then languages also were somehow at times chosen selectively, and they were standardized. Now you need to keep in mind that industrialization at this time was taking place. So when industrialization was taking place, that means that we needed to talk about different things. So with technological advancement, new language or new linguistic terms needed to enter into the language to enable us to talk about them. Now certain languages were chosen and they were standardized and work was done around them, while other languages were sort of like neglected. So somehow then these languages lacked the kind of vocabulary that would allow the people to participate in that kind of intellectual discussion if they wanted to move on to the next stage of development. So this was all not there something that was inherent in the languages, but it was how the languages were developed. So some were developed more, some were developed less. Then there was this focus on national language at the expense of other languages. And so this concept of one nation, everyone needs to sort of gravitate around that one focal point, and language, because it was this obvious symbol of national identity, it was encouraged. And then in language policies, the emphasis was on this assimilatory approach. Assimilate, bring in everybody and make them of the same kind rather than accept that they are different. You try to make them sort of like into the same caste. After the First World War and the Second World War, people were then forced to learn national languages. For instance, there is this case of Latvian. So the people were forced to learn Russian and not to speak their own languages. In several parts of other countries, at times people were jailed for speaking their languages. Even, for instance, in France, this other languages or other dialects, whatever you might call them, were suppressed at the expense of, and French was promoted to promote the French identity. And however, bilingualism, because it could not possibly be eradicated, it was very much there. You couldn't possibly have the whole country speaking only one language. There had to be varieties of language or different languages, whatever you would like to call them. They were used, even though they might be used unofficially or officially, but they were used in their instrumental, as an instrumental tool to teach the modernized language. For instance, you might use Urdu to teach English language. So that is how these languages were utilized, and they were also utilized to somehow to connect with people, but to connect with people, to assimilate them in towards one language. So yes, you speak to them in their language, but then you sort of discourage them from using that language, and to get to them that this is very important that everyone speaks the same language.